Welcome. We're so glad you've chosen to join us for this quiet time. This audiobook novel is a gentle companion, created to help you unwind and find a moment of peace. It is a simple story, designed to be a sanctuary of calm, where the world can slow down and your mind can rest. Our story is called Sorting Seeds in the Late Sun. We will join Finn in his quiet sunroom, where the afternoon light is warm and golden. Here, we will discover a deep and abiding peace in the simple, patient ritual of saving seeds for a future season, a gentle reminder of the quiet promises that nature always keeps. Before you settle in completely and let the story begin, if you find this kind of calming content helpful, a gentle like or subscription is a wonderful way to ensure others can find it too. For now, simply allow yourself to relax. Let your body feel heavy, your breath grow soft, and your mind be still. Chapter 1, The Wooden Box. The afternoon had reached its quietest point. The sun, having passed its zenith, now cast a warm golden light that seemed thicker and more gentle than the bright white light of midday. In the small sunroom on the west side of the cottage, this light streamed through the large, clean window pane, transforming the air into a shimmering, amber-hued medium. It laid a long, soft-edged rectangle of warmth across the worn wooden floor and illuminated the millions of dust motes performing their slow, silent ballet in its beam. The room was simple, furnished with only what was necessary for quiet pursuits. A sturdy wooden table, its surface softened and smoothed by years of use, stood in the center of the room. Against one wall, a set of deep shelves held terracotta pots, balls of twine, and stacks of gardening books. The air itself held a faint, dry perfume, a complex and comforting blend of sun-baked wood, old paper, and the earthy ghost of last year's dried herbs. Finn entered the room, his movements calm and deliberate, in perfect harmony with the room's peaceful atmosphere. He walked to the shelves, his eyes scanning the familiar objects before landing on his goal. On the middle shelf, nestled between a stack of clay saucers and a thick book on beekeeping, sat a simple, unvarnished pine box. It had no carvings, no paint, no hardware, save for two small, simple hinges at the back. Its beauty was in its simplicity and its purpose. He lifted the box from the shelf. It was light, but felt solid and well made in his hands. He could feel the fine grain of the pine, a subtle texture beneath his fingertips. He carried it to the table and set it down gently in the middle of the patch of sunlight. The wood seemed to glow, absorbing the warm light. He paused for a moment, his hands resting on the lid, simply enjoying the quiet of the room and the anticipation of the task ahead. With a gentle movement, he lifted the lid. There was no click or latch, just the soft sound of wood separating from wood. A scent, richer and more concentrated than the general aroma of the room, rose from the box's interior. It was the scent of pure, dry potential, the earthy smell of countless dried seeds, the papery fragrance of brittle pods and leaves, and the faint, sweet scent of the pine box itself. It was the smell of a garden sleeping through the winter. Inside, the box was a tidy collection of natural treasures. In one corner lay a handful of dried, silvery honesty seed pods, their surfaces like mother of pearl. In another, a small pile of feathery calendula seeds. The majority of the space was taken up by small, neatly folded paper envelopes, some already labeled in a soft, clear pencil script, others still blank and waiting. It was a library of future flowers, a catalog of quiet promises. Finn reached into the box, his fingers brushing past a crisp, dry sunflower head, its seeds still embedded in a perfect spiral. He was looking for something specific. His hands were gentle, respectful of the delicate contents. It was a search not of urgency, but of quiet exploration. The simple act of looking through the box was a pleasure in itself, a reconnection with the past season's work, and a gentle look toward the next. He found them at the bottom, a small collection of items wrapped in a piece of brown paper. He lifted the small parcel out and placed it on the table beside the box. The rest of the contents he left undisturbed, a quiet community waiting patiently for their turn. He closed the lid of the box for now. The soft thud of the wood, a gentle final sound. The first step was complete. The materials were at hand, resting on the table in a pool of warm, golden late afternoon sun. Chapter 2. The Brittle Pods. The sunroom was a vessel of quiet. The only sound was the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the world outside the glass. Finn sat at the wooden table, the pine box now closed beside him. In front of him lay the small parcel he had retrieved, its brown paper creased and softened from use. He carefully unfolded the corners, revealing its contents: a shallow, white ceramic bowl and a handful of dried poppy seed pods. The pods were beautiful, intricate objects. Each was a small ribbed globe, the size of a large marble, tapering to a slender stem. At the top of each globe was a tiny star-shaped crown, a delicate scalloped cap. They were a pale straw-like color, and when he picked one up, it felt impossibly light, a mere shell. He rolled it gently between his thumb and forefinger, feeling its dry, brittle texture. He could hear the hundreds of tiny seeds rattling softly inside, a miniature maraca created by nature. He held one of the pods up, positioning it in the direct beam of the afternoon sun. The light shone through its thin, papery walls, illuminating it from within. It looked like a tiny, magical lantern, its intricate structure revealed. He admired it for a moment, a perfect, self-contained vessel of life, a tiny treasure chest of future blooms. This quiet moment of appreciation was as much a part of the process as the work itself. Placing the white ceramic bowl in the center of the table, he took the first seed pod and held it over the clean, empty surface. The bowl was smooth and cool to the touch, its simple white color providing the perfect, neutral backdrop for the task. He brought his thumb and forefinger together, applying a gentle, steady pressure to the pod. The sound it made was wonderfully crisp and satisfying, a sharp, papery crackle that broke the deep silence of the room for just an instant. The pod gave way easily, splitting along its ribs. He crumbled the rest of the brittle shell between his fingers, letting the pieces fall into the bowl. And with the broken shell came the seeds. It was not a trickle, but a cascade. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of minuscule seeds poured from their container into the bowl. They were a deep, dusky blue-gray, almost black, and they flowed like a fine, dark sand. The sound they made as they hit the ceramic surface was a soft, continuous shush, a whisper of abundance. He watched, mesmerized, as the tiny seeds formed a neat, conical pile at the bottom of the bowl. He picked up another pod and repeated the process. The same crisp crackle, the same satisfying release. More and more seeds poured into the bowl, the dark pile growing larger, the air filled with a faint, dry, slightly nutty scent from the crushed pods and seeds. He worked slowly, methodically, pod by pod, until all of them had been opened, their treasure released. When he was done, the bowl contained a mixture of the tiny dark seeds and the larger, paler fragments of the broken pods. He gently swirled the bowl, watching the light catch the different textures. The task was not yet finished, but a major transition had occurred. The potential that had been locked away inside the protective shells was now out in the open. A small mountain of future life resting in a simple white bowl. The warm golden light of the sun slanted across the table, illuminating the scene with a gentle, almost reverent glow. Chapter 3. Winnowing the Chaff. The white bowl sat on the table, its contents a mixture of treasure and debris. The tiny, heavy poppy seeds were mingled with the light, papery fragments of their former homes. To save the seeds, the two needed to be separated. This was a task that required not a tool, but a partner, the gentle, invisible force of the air itself. Finn picked up the bowl, its weight having increased slightly, and carried it towards the large window. The window was a simple casement design, and he turned the iron handle, swinging one side of it open. A faint, cool breeze immediately entered the warm room, a welcome and refreshing presence. It stirred the air, causing the dust motes to dance more energetically and carrying the clean scent of the autumn garden inside. It wasn't a strong wind, just a soft, steady exhalation from the world outside. It was perfect. Finn stood beside the open window, holding the bowl in both hands. This process, known as winnowing, was an ancient art, a simple and elegant way to let nature do the work of sorting. It required a delicate touch and a patient heart. He held the bowl at a slight angle, positioning it so the gentle breeze could skim across its surface. He began to shake the bowl, not vigorously, but with a subtle circular motion. It was more of a gentle agitation, a quiet encouragement. The contents of the bowl began to move. The heavier seeds tended to stay low, settling toward the bottom, while the lighter pieces of chaff, the fragments of the dried pods, were tossed upwards, lifted by the motion and the air. As a piece of chaff reached the rim of the bowl, the breeze would catch it. He watched as the first fragment, a pale curved piece of husk, was lifted from the edge and carried away on the current of air. It floated for a moment, like a tiny boat on an invisible river, before drifting down to the floor outside the window. Another piece followed, then another. It was a slow, mesmerizing dance, Finn adjusted the angle of the bowl and the intensity of his shaking, responding to the subtle shifts in the breeze. He was in a quiet dialogue with the air, a little more tilt, a slightly faster shake. The chaff dutifully separated itself, flying free from the bowl, leaving the precious seeds behind. It was deeply satisfying to watch, a process of purification that felt both magical and entirely natural. He continued this for several minutes, his concentration focused completely on the bowl in his hands. The pile of dark seeds grew more and more distinct as the last of the pale chaff was carried away. He would pause every so often, setting the bowl down to pick out a larger, more stubborn piece of stem with his fingers, his movements precise and careful. Finally, it was done. He looked down into the bowl. Where there had once been a jumbled mix, there was now only a clean, pure collection of seeds. They formed a neat, dark pile, a stark and beautiful contrast against the clean white ceramic. Thousands upon thousands of tiny, perfect seeds, each one a complete package of genetic information, a blueprint for a future flower. He ran his finger through the pile, marveling at the texture. It felt like a fine, cool sand flowing around his finger. He lifted a small pinch of the seeds and let them cascade back into the bowl, listening again to their soft, whispering rustle. The task of separation was complete. He closed the window, the iron handle clicking softly into place, and carried the bowl of clean seeds back to the sun-drenched table. Chapter 4. To the paper packets. The clean, dark seeds now rested in the white bowl, a testament to the patient work of separation. The next stage of the ritual was one of preservation and promise. Finn turned his attention to a small stack of objects on the table next to the pine box, a dozen or so small empty paper envelopes, and a simple wooden pencil with a soft, dark lead. The envelopes were plain and unadorned, made of a soft, cream-colored paper that felt slightly fibrous to the touch. They were the perfect vessels, breathable, simple, and ready to receive their precious contents. He picked one up, folding back the ungummed flap at the top to create a wide opening. The act of opening the empty packet felt like an invitation. He placed the envelope upright on the table, using a small, smooth stone from the windowsill to prop it up so it wouldn't fall over. Then he lifted the white ceramic bowl. Tilting it carefully, he brought the edge of the bowl to the mouth of the envelope. He began to pour. The seeds flowed in a steady, narrow stream from the bowl into the packet. The sound they made was one of the most satisfying sounds in the world, a soft, continuous, sand-like rustle. It was the sound of abundance, of tiny things gathering in great numbers. It was a dry, whispering sound that filled the quiet of the sunroom. He poured slowly, ensuring every last seed made it into the envelope without spilling. He didn't fill the packet completely, leaving enough space at the top for it to be folded securely. He set the now heavy bowl aside and picked up the filled envelope. It had a pleasing weight and substance to it now. He could feel the dense collection of seeds inside, a small, heavy heart in the center of the paper. He tapped the bottom of the packet gently on the table, the rustling sound settling as the seeds found their place. Now, for the final act of documentation. He picked up the pencil. It was a hexagonal pencil, worn down from use, its yellow paint chipped in places. He loved its simplicity. He held it comfortably in his hand, and in his neatest, clearest script, he wrote on the front of the envelope. The soft lid made a gentle scraping sound against the paper's surface, another quiet layer in the room's soundscape. He wrote just one word, Poppy. Beneath it, he wrote the year. That was all the information that was needed. The simple name held all the identity required, the color of the future flowers, the time of year they would bloom, the way they would dance in the breeze. The year was a marker of its vintage, a note for his future self. He looked at the finished packet. The dark, soft pencil marks against the cream-colored paper were visually pleasing. The simple, handwritten word felt more personal and honest than any printed label. It was a collaboration between him and the garden, and this was its simple, humble record. He had transformed the chaotic potential of the harvested pods into an orderly, accessible promise. He had created a small, self-contained chapter of the garden's ongoing story, ready for the next season. The task was almost complete. Chapter 5. Returning to the box. The single, newly filled packet lay on the table, its purpose clear, its contents secure. The afternoon sun, now very low in the sky, had turned from gold to a soft, rosy orange. The light filled the room with a warm, gentle blush, signaling the day's end. The shadows of the table legs were long and stretched out across the floor. It was time to finish the day's quiet work. Finn picked up the seed packet. It felt solid and full of potential in his hand. He folded the top flap down, making a neat, crisp crease with his thumbnail. He then folded it over once more, creating a secure closure that would keep the tiny seeds from escaping. There was no need for glue or tape. The simple, careful folds were enough. He took a moment to tidy the workspace. The empty white bowl was placed back on the shelf. The small, smooth stone was returned to its place on the windowsill. The pencil was laid next to the remaining stack of empty envelopes, ready for the next batch of seeds, the marigolds or the cosmos perhaps, on another quiet afternoon. Order was restored, leaving no trace of the gentle activity except for the one finished packet. Then he turned back to the pine box. He lifted the lid once more, the familiar scent of dry things rising to greet him. The interior of the box, with its collection of other packets and pods, was bathed in the warm orange light. It looked like a small chest of treasures. He found a space amongst the other labeled envelopes, which read calendula, larkspur, and cornflower in the same neat, soft script. He slid the new poppy seed packet into place. It fit perfectly. It now joined the quiet community of its peers, a new member in the library of sleeping flowers. The sight was deeply satisfying. It was a visual representation of a season's work, of care and foresight, of a partnership with the garden. Each packet was a promise, a quiet conversation he was having with the future. He lingered for a moment, his hand resting inside the box, his gaze drifting over the neatly arranged packets. He thought of the cycle, the planting of a seed, the growth of a plant, the blooming of a flower, the setting of a new seed, and now this, the careful saving, ready to begin the cycle all over again. It was a slow, beautiful, and dependable rhythm, and being a small part of it brought a profound sense of peace. With a final gentle touch, he drew his hand back and lowered the lid of the pine box. The lid settled into place with a soft, final thump. The sound was one of closure, of completion. The seeds were safe now, protected by the fragrant pine, waiting in the cool darkness for their time to come again. The promise of next year's poppies was securely stored away. Finn stood up from the table. The sun had dipped below the distant hills, and the direct light was gone from the room, replaced by a soft purple twilight. The work was done. He had taken a small piece of the past summer and prepared it for the future. He felt a deep, quiet contentment, the kind that comes not from great achievement, but from a small, simple task performed with care and attention. The sunroom settled back into its evening stillness, its purpose fulfilled for another day.